like to call this evening's meeting together. If we can all stand and for a moment of silence and a salute to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the August 10th North Hill School Board meeting. And we will start this with public comments on the agenda items only. I think someone has signed up. Mr. Vesley, is that? If you would be kind enough, Mr. Yeomans will read our policy statement before, and then, of course, name and address for the...
I think Ed knows our policy.
You okay with that? Suspending it? That's fine. If name and address for the record, Mr. Vesley.
Ed Vesley, 116 Lingay Drive. Just a quick comment. The information on the change orders for McIntyre was very brief in the, was available to the public online. I see in the book there's a little bit more information. Looking forward to Mr. Thomas's presentation, but I would ask you that either Mr. Thomas stick around afterwards for questions, or if you would, please open it to public so we can discuss that if you're going to let him leave early. Thank you.
Thanks. Sure. Okay. We're still not ready for John, I assume.
No.
Okay, that's fine. And we can now move on to board member comments, if there are any this evening.
One, I just have a commercial for the band camp performance at Conakry. It's the annual preview show tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. So if anyone has a chance to go out, it's your first chance to see the 2017-18 band on the field.
Great. Is this not the largest one this year? I mean, as far as students, I think it is.
Yeah, that's what Len wrote.
Yeah.
To all of us.
I thought so.
Yeah, there's
Another
good concessions,
thing,
yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Bring-
the band parents will have concessions up there. I was like, no,
guess
the
so.
band parents will have concessions up there. So if you haven't had a chance to eat, you can actually eat before you see the band.
Great.
And support the band at the same time.
Thank
So-
you. Anybody else, ladies?
No, that's what I was
Okay,
going to
great.
say.
Me too.
Thank you.
Great
Okay.
minds think alike.
And so do yours.
We can now move to approval of the minutes. This is that the board, I'll make a motion that the board approve the minutes from the June 1st, 2017 work session legislative meeting and the June 8th, 2017 legislative meeting.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, we're going to bring Mr. Thomas up when we're ready, but we'll move on to education. Mrs. Bender, if you wouldn't mind, please.
All right, there are 6 items on the agenda this evening. The Glade Run St. Stephen's Day Student Education Agreement. Are there any questions concerning this? Number 2, the affiliation agreement with Slippery Rock University for student teaching. Number 3, the agreement with Wesley Spectrum. Number 4, the 2017-2018 Waterfront Learning Annual Agreement. Number 5, the 2017-18 agreement between North Hills School District and the Meadows Psychiatric Center. Number 6, the amendment to EduLink agreement. Are there any questions? There being no questions, the superintendent recommends, and I so move, that the board approve education items 1 through 6.
So moved.
Just
I
add
moved
to the
it.
agenda.
Need a second.
Second.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Is there any discussion?
I didn't think it was the second one.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mrs. Bender.
Welcome.
We could move on to, looks like athletics and activities, and that would be Mr. Muhall.
Yes, we have one item on the agenda, and that's that the board approve Resolution 2017-8, recognizing North Hills Indians Football Parents Association as official booster organization in the North Hills School District. So there's a letter attached. Are there any questions on that?
I have a question. Does each booster group have to renew this every year?
No. Once they're approved by the district, then they don't have to renew it.
And we've never done the North Hills Indians football parents?
Nope.
I don't believe so. They didn't have their.
They're only about 100
513
years
and all
old, I
that,
think,
yeah.
right?
I know, that's why I asked.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank Thank you. Okay. Is there,
Okay,
I'll
I'm sorry.
second it.
Thank you. Is there any discussion?
He didn't make a motion.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Okay.
Being no further questions, Superintendent recommends, and I so move, that the board approve athletics and activities, item 1.
okay, I'll second that.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. It looks like we don't have anything under Beatty unless Mr. Nudie or Mrs. Bender has anything they want to. I have nothing.
I think the only thing is that
Arlene.
we are having our meeting next week.
Arlene.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
We are having our meeting next week as opposed to the fourth Thursday.
Oh, good. Okay.
And there's a difference there. And we have, I can't remember, I know we got it, but our enrollment for Beatty is skyrocketing, which is
That's good.
absolutely fantastic
Good news.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Is that North Hills or overall?
overall.
Good.
That's good news. Thank you. We can now move on to personnel. That'd be Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Wilgus. Personnel items are addressed in executive session. Therefore, the superintendent recommends, and I so move, that we approve personnel items 1 through 8.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mrs. Reed, it looks like we don't have anything under policy unless there's something that
No,
I'm... Okay.
nothing under policy.
Thank you. And Mr. Yeomans, we'll turn it over to you for community and intergovernmental relations.
We have one item on the agenda, and that's to approve our annual Ross Westview EMSA contract. It provides us unlimited ambulance services to the district at a cost of $2,500. So superintendent recommends, and I so move, we approve item 1.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the contract? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Yeomans. We'll move on to finance. Dr. Nolish?
Okay, thank you. We've got 4 items this month, the general fund bills, the construction fund bills, the budget transfers, and the payroll for the months of June and July. The superintendent recommends, and I so move, that the board approve finance items 1 through 4.
Second.
Second. Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Mrs. Spade, I guess we are moving on to support services.
Right. I have one change order for McIntyre, and there's a motion to approve. But I have a question. Can I ask it now?
Sure, absolutely.
Dave, could you give us a little insight on what these change orders, if there are new costs to our project or old costs?
I guess, first of all, Mr. Thomas is going to explain these in detail in his report. But as change orders, they are all new costs. The first one being the cost for the additional underground stormwater detention facilities that the township requested. The second being a change order to install isolation valves on the water lines coming from the existing building into the new building. Essentially, they're extending those lines into the new building. By putting these valves on in between, we can separate the new section from the old section. And it won't have any impact on allowing the old section to run while the new section's under construction. And the third one is to put a different switch on the range hood in the kitchenette and the special education room. And it's basically so that switch is at a handicap level. And it was originally designed up on the hood like most range hoods are.
Right.
We had to put it down low enough to be at a handicap level.
Okay. I have one more question.
Please, go for it.
I'd like, in none of the first two, the second ones I understand, or the third one I understand. These things weren't looked at prior to the bids we got and what that was drawn out for us to look at?
If you remember when we went out to bid on the project, we were still in discussions with the township as to what their requirements were going to be.
Right.
For underground storm detention. We had what we believed met all the requirements, but they asked for more, and the board agreed to give them more.
So we could go on with the project.
Right.
So we could go on with the
Stuck
project.
against time.
Correct.
You probably remember that.
And the second one, it's not necessary for the construction of the building, but if you want to isolate that new section of the building
You need that.
and run the existing building while the new section is under construction, you got to put these valves in. So the engineers didn't put them in because it's not necessary for the construction, but it is quite beneficial.
Okay, thank you for your
Mr.
explanation.
Muhal?
Yeah, I guess the real question is, on number one, when we received the approval from the township back in, was that May? I
Yes.
think, the
Around
middle,
there.
like mid-May? This was not a requirement at that time, or?
I didn't know we needed it.
We went out to bid before we got the final
That's-
approval. We
that's-
were in
that's-
negotiations with their engineering firm.
Yeah.
But timing was such, we had to get out to bid.
Okay, I guess maybe I misunderstood when I thought we got that email that we were approved in May. I thought that was final approval.
It was conditional approval.
Yeah, it was conditional. We were out to bid before that.
So they determined from, what, one of the studies that this was needed, or?
Well, I think John's going to
Maybe-
get into
yeah.
that a little
Yeah.
bit. So
John
maybe,
can
maybe
probably
we
explain
turn
it
this
better
over
than
to
I.
him.
Or, yeah, am I stealing your thunder,
No,
or?
before we vote on this, we're going to take John's presentation and then we'll, okay? 'Cause
Let's do that.
Yeah, and I apologize for the running around, but the computer has died, which we were using this week with induction, so I don't know what happened to it. My iPad's not connected to the Wi-Fi in here because it's cellular, so we are running off of my phone, and so I'm going to stand by John as he goes through this so that we're on the same page at the same time.
Whatever
This is
works.
like
We
Apollo
take a-
13.
Yes.
Can we take a picture of that? I mean,
You'll be on the,
It's magnificent.
Yeah.
Actually, Pat, I'm going to
Technology
skip through the
update.
first couple slides
Okay.
because
Yeah.
just to bring you up to speed,
Please.
we've done one report that handles everything to date, so we've done so much since the first couple of months went by that it doesn't make sense to rehash where we are. So I'm going to get to the schedule analysis. Keep going. Let's start here for a second, just so this will help Mr. Muha orient himself with the timing. So we had planned to issue a notice to proceed on 4/24/17. And right around that time, I was in talking with you about awarding contracts. And I explained that I wanted your vote for them, but we were going to hold off on signing the actual paperwork until we had an idea from the township what they were going to require us to do. They were going to ask us to do something that was completely impossible, then we were just going to reject the bids and try again next year. So near the end of April, we were getting very close to having an understanding between your civil engineer and the township's consulting engineer on what would be required. And I think I told you at the time that I was expecting an additional cost somewhere just north of $50,000, maybe as high as $75,000 to do this. And what we found, it was going to be, what they wanted was a little bit different than that $50,000 scope of work. So the schedule for the project was to issue that notice to proceed on 4/24. We didn't. We didn't issue it until 5/15, which is shortly after we received word from the township on what it was going to be. So we backed the schedule up. We couldn't start exactly when we thought we could. We held the overall durations for it, and I'm going to show you some progress tonight. We've actually had the contractors move a little faster than the schedule required, so we're only going to be a little bit into the school year with the completion. So everything has gone, the construction has gone very smoothly. And we're going to look for a substantial completion date of 9/12 instead of the 8/23 that we had originally planned. So let's move on, Pat. So this is the chart that I give you guys all the time, and you can never read. But what it shows you is, zoom out a little bit. These light gray bars, those are my baseline.
Can you?
The darker shaded in colors, the blue, they are the actual progress and the forecast. The red is the critical path that we have to keep our eye on to make sure that there's critical activity. We get those done, project will be done on time. We don't get And if you want any more detail on that, I can give it to you. But essentially, we are building an addition in 3 months, which is just unheard of, that we can go that fast. Look at what your neighbors are doing over across Thompson. And it's taking them like considerably longer to build a building over there. This is going like gangbusters. It was designed to go very quickly. It was all off-the-shelf pieces, very little fabrication, except for the doors and windows. Just about everything was off-the-shelf materials. So that plan worked. Now, let's move on. Here's our manpower summary. Project's been heavily loaded with manpower. If you've stopped over there, you've seen continuous progress every week. There's a transformation that happens every week. So we've got fair share of labor. Next. Don't get too excited by the lag between payments. That you're going to pay that amount before we're done. But when you're moving this quick, the payments per month are relatively high. So, like I said, you're going to catch up to that black line. You're just not there yet. Next. Budget report. Here you can see where we're taking a hit in the hard cost with the change orders, the total of them at $141,000. We budgeted almost $122,000 for change order contingency. That's going to put us $19,000 over the budget. Next slide. All is not lost. There are other funds that are held in the project for soft costs, and it looks like we're underrunning some of these categories. I don't know that we'll completely underrun all of them to the degree that we are now, but there's a chance that we can recover at least that $19,000 from the soft cost contingency and get you whole by the end of the job. And here are the change orders. Let's just take a peek here at GC001 because this is the one I know you're all most interested in. And before I get on with the number of that, first I want to let you know that we are placing the contractor through the general contractor, DeMarco. We did go out and solicit prices from other contractors. So we went to other contractors that are not under contract in the effort of making sure that we had a lot of competitiveness because this number was so high. And what we planned to do was if we couldn't get the general contractor to the lowest number that we were getting from the other contractors, we were simply going to say, hey, we've solicited prices from others. We'd like you to bring them in as a sub. Fortunately, we did get the general contractor to agree to the number that we came up with. Let's move on to the next slide, Pat. So let's take a little trip down memory lane first. So up at the top we have the parking lot at Ross Park Mall. You can see that just down over the hill there's a little roadway and the fire tower just above the white arrow there. And we shaded in blue, maybe accidentally representative of water, because there's never any water in it. But just to give you the lay of the land, the blue is the detention basin. Back in 2008, that detention basin was modified by the school district. In the original addition construction, the school district entered into an agreement with Ross Park Mall where the school district's contractors made that basin bigger so that it could contain a volume of water that was commensurate with the additional runoff that was generated by the 2008 addition. So you had no detention facility on your property. You were detaining the water upstream before it got to your property in exchange for doing detention on your site. That water was to flow down the pipe structure that exits that detention basin. connect into a pipe that runs the whole way across your site to the arrow that I have going across there to the outflow area. People have noted that there have been some issues with the outflow. One was an erosion issue that was really quite obvious. There was an excess amount of water that went through the pipe traversing the site. It blew the manhole cover off. Water came out of the top of the manhole, eroded the grade the whole way down to the creek that it deposits into. That's what got the interest of the neighbors that live adjacent to creek. They saw that erosion had occurred there and thought that there was something that was happening with excess water being directed into the system by the school district. In reality, it was quite the opposite. The manhole had been built with baffles to slow down the flow of water, and when the excess flow of water hit the baffles, it percolated up out of the top of the manhole. The civil engineer who designed that originally is out there fixing that manhole, removing the baffles at his cost. So as we moved into the new project, the current project, the plan was to once again modify the Ross Park Mall detention basin simply by changing the size of the holes that exit the basin to detain slightly more water in the basin. Civil engineers, your civil engineers, went the whole way through the process, submitted that, and I think we were about this close to approval. And then there was further discussion that was entered into, and I told you about that at the last meeting. The outcome of that was that the school district's civil engineer and the township's civil engineer would participate in reviewing other options for enhancing the amount of detention that was exiting the McIntyre site. And I think it's fair to say, inclusive of the water that was being dumped on the McIntyre site from adjacent properties. Let's move to the next slide just briefly, and I think we might want to come back. So up at the very top of the sheet, the shaded gray area, that's the new addition that's under construction. There's a series of pipes exiting that addition. Also, there's a thin black line coming over and meeting at the first intersection of that blue pipe that is connecting the former roof drains that are exiting the parts of the original building and the 2008 addition. Those two sources of rainwater collect into the other pipe that's leading down to the fatter pipes. The fatter pipes are underground tanks where additional water will be stored. And then after that water is stored, it is released at a very slow rate into the system that's on site that feeds into the pipe traversing the site that eventually deposits into the creek. If you could scroll up just a little bit, Pat, up the other way. Okay. In the light green area, this is the reason I thought it would be $50,000 to $75,000 instead of $140,000. My intention was to take this green area where we were digging about a 4-foot deep excavation, and we were filling it with stone in the original design that was presented to the township. And that was so that the water that was running off the new impervious areas would go into that gravel and percolate into the subsoils. My intention was to, instead of digging a new big hole to put the tanks in, was to take that big hole we were digging, put the pipes in that big hole that we already owned, and then backfill it with gravel. That was unacceptable to the township. They wanted us to have that infiltration bed and the tank farm. So that's why you're seeing the difference from my initial guesstimate versus what we're going to end up paying. It's the cost of digging the excavation for all the tanks, buying the tanks, backfilling with gravel, and making the interconnections of the pipes. Let's scroll back to the previous slide. So that new tank farm now is over where the words new tank farm are. It's right just, I guess, south of where the playground will be. It'll deposit into the pipe that's traversing the site at a much lower rate. Now, the obvious question is, does this fix all the problems of the neighbors downstream? No. No, the analogy I've made, it's very crude, but I think it's effective. It's like building a project next to Niagara Falls. And the people at Niagara Falls Township say, hey, we'd like you to reduce your flow rate coming off your building to what that land was originally. And we say, fine. And here, we'll go and we'll put some barrels beside the falls and we'll collect our water and then we'll let it trickle out of the barrels. Niagara Falls is still coming down. You're not really solving the overall problem over there. And then another observation, and I think the neighbors alongside of the stream, they've been very, very patient. They've been dealing with this for years. I pointed out to the township that we have a 30 to, it might have been 30, we're changing it to 36-inch pipe coming out of our manhole, which has been there forever. It was there before the next pipe downstream. We have water coming through a 36-inch pipe at a relatively low velocity. The velocity will be lowered, goes into the stream, flows down to this street down here. I can't remember the name of it. And a pipe goes under the street. That pipe is a 12-inch pipe. So I always thought that perhaps that 12-inch pipe was an oversight. I'm starting to think more like that 12-inch pipe was the design. It was the design to back up water in the creek so that more water didn't flow out into the bigger creek that's just on the other side of the road. But until the township or the homeowners do something with their downstream restrictions with that smaller pipe, they're going to continue to have water backed up in that stream. And until the people upstream find a way to get the water that's supposed to be running into the Ross Park Mall detention basin, and instead of letting it run down over the hill into the McIntyre property and the McIntyre neighbors' property, you're going to continue to have some issues there. Now, let's take some questions just on this issue.
So we're going way above and beyond what we need to do to take care of our property, but the problem north of us and the problem south of us isn't being addressed.
No one can ever accuse the North Hills School District of not being not only a good neighbor, but a great neighbor and a neighbor who bends over backwards. Because not only have you attempted to rectify this problem once, you've done it twice. I think you've gone above and beyond, in my opinion. Mr. Nudie.
When we did the renovation in 2007, and we enlarged the detention pond, who determined that the detention pond had to be enlarged?
Your engineers, CEC, which is the same engineering firm we're using for this project, they calculated the additional runoff that would come as a result of constructing the new impervious area in the 2008 addition. And instead of building the tanks on the McIntyre site, they opted to enlarge the detention basin upstream to hold an equivalent capacity so that by the time the newly restricted water at Ross Park Mall merged with the increased outflow from the McIntyre site, that the net effect at the outflow would be zero.
Well, did that ever act as a detention pond?
I think it would have acted as a detention basin if the right amount of water was going into it. I don't know what the history of the changes on the Ross Park Mall site were, and I remember I remember meeting with some of the neighbors over at the township building, and they said, there's never any water in that basin up there. And I said, well, there's not supposed to be any water in it. It's not a pond. It's a basin that collects water and then lets it flow back out. And they said, well, we never see anything. And I thought we just weren't understanding each other. In the end, they were right. There's no water going into it. I've stood up at the top of the hill in that lot that was built adjacent to Park and Ride in the middle of the rain, waiting for water to appear in the basin, and I've yet to see anything happen.
And so we enlarged that for some reason. Number like $60,000 for the last enlargement. Would that sound right to you?
Don't recall that, but I know there was an amount that the school district paid to Ross Park Mall.
Initially,
I think it was in the $25,000 range. Don't quote me on that. It was a sizable amount of money, and then there was construction work that your general contractor did in 2008 to make that enlargement and build the new outlet structure.
So, but at that time,
it was believed water was actually going into the basin.
But at that time, we also were going to split the cost of that with Ross Park Mall. But at the last minute, they backed out.
I don't recall that detail. I just know that we wanted rights to go onto their property and enlarge the basin, and use that basin to offset the detention volume that would have been generated by your 2008 project.
And also, at that time, didn't we dig the ditches deeper and lined them with rock?
Don't recall that.
Okay.
Mrs. Bender?
No, not the ditches coming from the mall. We did redo a
Oh, I'm sorry, the rock
ditch
line
right
swale.
up above our hill,
Yeah, if you can see it in this
parallel
photo.
with our building.
If you look at the W in outflow, the word outflow, you'll see that there's a gray line moving into that. What that's doing is, and a lot of people might not realize this either. People come down McIntyre Road all the time and they think it's just a big hill that's descending. Well, when you get in front of the school, it flattens out and then it starts going back uphill again. So you have a hill coming down, all the water over here draining off onto here, all the water coming down McIntyre Road draining here. It hits a catch basin that whoever owns the road put in, gets transferred under the road into another catch basin that actually sits about 3 inches above the grade, so no water goes into it. It's really just used as a jumping box. And then discharges over the hill onto your property. And then you guys pay the money to dig this rock-lined trench that slows the flow of water down, it meanders around and goes down just on the other side of the outlet structure from the pipe.
If I recall, we did that to appease one particular commissioner last time. So we've been over backwards.
I think that recollection is correct.
Mrs. Bender?
First of all, I want to thank you for letting us know, that we as a school district have done everything in order to deal with the problems that we have.
I'd say everything squared.
That's right. And unfortunately, it appears that the neighbors and even our commissioners seem to blame the school district for everything that takes place. My concern is that you indicated that there are ways that this stuff could be fixed. It's not our responsibility. We're doing everything we can. My big concern is this 36-inch pipe that goes into a 12-inch pipe. And if the commissioners or if Ross Township decides that they're going to fix that, could they blame us for that? Or, can they say, well, you did this. This is your fault.
I wish I knew. I can't hazard a guess if they would blame you or not.
Okay. That's
normally people say, okay, big pipe, goes a little bit, more water comes in, pipe gets bigger, it goes a little further, pipe gets bigger. Not here. It goes downstream, pipe gets smaller.
I know, because I don't want us to be looking at in 10 years or 5 years when this has to be fixed again, that the school district has to put out at that point in time, it'll probably be a couple $1 million to fix that whole thing.
Yeah, I think it would be wise to save this videotape
For the township, yeah.
and put it in a, maybe we can put it in a time capsule inside the tank farm, because I don't know that we ever have to worry about that tank farm filling up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yes,
Do you-
Mr. Nudi.
One other thing I'd like to add, the township is not going to deal with any stormwater drainage because it's not in their DNA to do such. Because if they address this one issue, there are 1,000 other
Other ones,
stormwater drainage issues in the township. And if they address the one, they're going to have to address those. Okay, and everywhere we've gone, we've addressed their stormwater drainage.
I don't know, they may have broken the seal with Chi-Chi's.
Pardon me?
They may have broken the seal on that with the Chi-Chi's site pipe.
Yeah, they did a lot of work, or had to.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, McKnight was flooded.
Mike?
At any point in the discussion between CEC, our engineers, and Gateway, their engineers, was there ever any real come to Jesus moment that the real issue is above us and below us?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right.
That was more of a come to Satan moment.
All right, thank you. Joe?
I got, yeah, again, I just wanted to go back. Sorry, I wanted to just be.
No
clear.
problem.
And I do remember at the April meeting that, in fact, I think I did ask that what if we didn't get approval? You know, we were approving the contracts, and what if we didn't get approval? So I do remember that.
Now remember, just to be clear, you were voting conditionally.
Yes.
Your
yeah.
vote was conditional, and
Yeah, exactly.
it was conditional to getting that approval from the township. And again, just to be clear, if this was going to go to a point of beyond this, if it was going to go beyond this, I was going to come back and tell you, let's stop.
Right.
And that discussion was had.
Yeah, and that was April, we voted conditionally, but,
Yeah.
you know, when we got the approval in May, is that tank part of that approval?
Yes,
Okay, it did come in May,
yes.
okay, so,
And the time that between now and then was our negotiation with the contractors and making sure we were bringing the best price forward
Okay.
to you. And again, we didn't see it as an encumbrance that would prevent occupancy. And the other thing is we would want to come out of the site anyhow, so that we didn't box ourselves in with having a big giant hole over there where we're trying to get things in and out of the site. So it would be done last.
and then just kind of a side question, that tank holds the water, and how is that water released gradually?
There are orifice plates inside the outlet structure of the tank, and they are set up for various frequency storms.
Mm-hmm.
The longer frequency storms, like a 25-year, it's released at a different rate than the earlier frequency storms. But the two engineering firms sat down and they agreed, and this is per the ordinance. The ordinance spells this out. They agreed how they would interpret the rainfall and calculate the capacity requirements, and then the release rate.
Okay,
So essentially, you're putting a small hole in the end of the outflow structure, and you're making the water build up if you have a really heavy storm. But it's only being fed by the roof drains.
So this solution
ma'am.
has been approved by the township, is an agreement by the township's engineer.
That's correct.
So there should not be any.
As was the last one in 2008.
So there should not be any issues when it comes to occupancy permits or anything like that?
Shouldn't be.
Okay.
We have no jurisdiction over whether there are issues.
Right.
It's just my opinion. Shouldn't be.
Sure.
Shouldn't be, but we are clear that we are doing what the township, if we vote to approve this, we are doing what the township has requested we do.
Yeah. And I'll say again, I really think that your engineers and the township engineers work very collaboratively to come up with the best that they can come up with.
Okay. Are there any other discussion?
Do we want to take Mr. Vesley now?
Why not? documents, public matter, sure.
Couple of technical questions. What size are the underground storage tanks?
They are 60-inch diameter.
And the infiltration bed, how deep?
4 feet deep.
And are you actually able to get?
And then there's actually a paving thickness on top of that. So the entire depth to the bottom of the infiltration bed is actually a little deeper than 4 feet.
And then, are you actually getting infiltration into the subsoil?
Yes.
Or all of that?
There was an infiltration study done for the original submission. And actually, it was the second submission. First submission went in without the infiltration study. Township requested it. CEC did it. And then that was eventually okayed by the township.
Is there any concern that that infiltration would end up undermining the parking lot or the ball field at some point? Water tends to migrate down the middle of the valley.
I'm not real concerned because it's only taking the playground area, the impervious area of the playground, and it's draining to one side of the playground, and then it drains down through gravel that daylights to the surface. So it's not a lot of water going into the infiltration bed. It was kind of a technicality that we were adding a new impervious area, and we had to find a way to make that disappear in the calculations. Is that all?
Thank you.
You got to have more than that.
All righty. So there.
Okay, let's move on. I want to show you a couple photos. Okay, so here's the building shell. It's built. We're 2.5 months into the construction, and boom, there's an addition there. Next one. This is the back side of the building, and you can see the wood up at the top. That's where the roofer is topping off his work. This is the stairway. It's going to look out through a window very similar to what was on the end of the existing building. This is the mechanical, electrical, plumbing rough-ins, cable tray, heating water in the black pipe, and hot water recirculation and cold water to the right. This is work inside the existing building. We had to run pipes down the existing corridor to get down to the boiler room to take the new utilities out to the addition. Metal stud work, ready for gypsum board, which is starting next week in earnest. There's a couple boards installed, but we're not going to make a big deal about it. This is water that the roofer shoved down the roof drains to get it off the roof to finish up. Is that the last one? Okay. Now let's go back to that change order sheet. Okay. So I'm keep going. Words. There we go. Okay, so GCO1, we're recommending this. I think we've gone through this pretty thoroughly, but we're recommending an increase in DeMarco's contract of $140,000 for the underground detention facility. HCO1 is adding the separation valves to separate the building from the addition, which is it's a nice thing to have, and as many separation valves as you can get, but I think this is something that the engineer looked at and said, I don't really need those, so he didn't put them in. But we're looking to put them in now. And then the second one is, along with, this is kind of part and parcel to the review of the site design, because the township was reluctant to go the whole way through with their building code review until we knew that we had reached an agreement on there. So there were some things on the architect's drawings that needed to be corrected. But we had already received the bids. So this was one of the items, and it's simply an ADA issue to have a switch to turn the exhaust fan on and off down low. Any questions on those other ones, folks? Yes, ma'am.
So the isolation valves, are they going to be in before school starts, before you start?
I think they're in already.
Okay, good, good answer.
We just looked at the pipes that they're connected to, so
Okay.
they're in.
So I guess, in other words, we better ratify that one, is what you're telling us.
Please.
Okay.
It should be noted that without the isolation valves, you would not have been able to start up air conditioning in that building.
Right.
until the addition was
Right.
completed.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's why I wanted to make sure the time.
Well, you could have been running water through the pipes, and they would have been turned off at the run out.
Okay.
So you could have. I wouldn't advise it.
Anything else, John?
Nothing else from me, unless you guys have any other questions.
Any other comments? Okay, so we have a second and no other comments. All in favor?
I didn't read it.
Oh,
Aye.
you didn't?
No.
I thought you
No,
read
you
it.
put me on hold.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Go ahead. All yours.
The superintendent recommends, and I so move, that the board approve support service item number 1.
Okay.
Second.
All right, no further comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mrs. Spade. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Do we have any other additional public comments before we take a adjournment of the meeting? Okay, there being none, I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.